the dyes you can't kill a bacteria, as we found out from Béchamp, but it was poking holes in the bacteria and forcing them to return back to spore form of somatids, right? So you could say it was killing them, but it wasn't. It was just stopping their form and making them go back to somatid shape. Well, this is IG Farben. That's who we got the dyes from, is the colorant industry. Merck, IG Farben. You can go down the list. So when you take antibiotics because you have a bacterial infection, if you notice, if you go look at antibiotics, it's a pill with hundreds of blue, red, light green, purple, orange dots. Have you noticed all these bright colors in there? They're giving you paint to kill your bacteria that are trying to eat your dead tissue. That's why your antibiotics have all these colorful dots, because they're full of paints that kill bacteria and return them to spore form. Now those bacteria know there's paint and deadly toxins in the atmosphere. They will come back as yeast and fungus. Now you have a yeast infection. We don't know what's going on. We gave you antibiotics, and all of a sudden you have a yeast infection. You're like, yeah, because I had regular bacteria eating my dying tissue and poisons. You poisoned them with colorants from fucking IG Farben. You killed them. Now they know that won't do anymore in a bacteria form, so pleomorphism. They come back as a fungus or a yeast. Now you have a yeast infection. You're like, yeah, you gave me the yeast infection. There were no yeast in my body because I didn't have paintballs in my body. Now you poison my bacteria with paint, and now the yeast came back, and now what do? We gave you a stronger antibiotic that kills yeast form. Then they go back to a somatid form. Then they come back as a fungus inside you. Now you have a fungus infection. You're like, I wouldn't have any of that if you didn't give me paint balls. Go look at an antibiotic pill and look at the multicolored paintballs. This is where IG Farben and all these chemical factories grew up from Robert Koch, because they're poisoning you with paint that puts holes in the walls of your bacteria. You can't kill a bacteria, but you can make them return back to the spore form that's much smaller, which is called a bacteriophage. And then they come back stronger because that's their job, is to eat dead tissue. And if they can't do it in the environment, they will turn into a form that can do it in the environment. And if you make that environment that they can't live in, they will come back into a meaner, nastier form. Now you're being eaten alive by a fungus.
Yeah.
They will eat you alive because that's their job, is to come back so mean and hungry that they can survive the paint poisoning of antibiotics. So yeah, now you're being eaten alive by a fungus that would never have been there if these dickheads wouldn't have given you antibiotics. They cut your tonsils out. You have tonsillitis. Well, there's poisons coming in every time you eat something or breathe. Your tonsils are there to catch the toxins and the poisons. The bacteria in your body come and eat the toxins, and they cause inflammation. So you get tonsillitis, which is inflammation of the tonsils because they're being eaten by bacteria because there's poisons there. What do? They give you antibiotics. They kill the bacteria. They go back to tiny spore forms, and they go, well, we can't come back as bacteria again because we can't survive this. Let's come back as yeast. They kill it again. They say, oh, that's not going to work. Let's come back as fungus. Now you have tonsillitis. So what do? They cut out your tonsils.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They cut your tonsils out. Oh, you don't need your tonsils. You're like, you don't think the nature put my tonsils there for a reason? Yeah. So they cut your tonsils out. Now, every toxin and poison you eat and breathe, you don't have tonsils to trap it anymore. So they go into your body. And now you have cancer and 6,000 other diseases because these dickheads cut your tonsils out and killed your bacteria with antibiotics. This all comes from Robert Koch dying slides to see bacteria and noticing that bacteria died back to spore form when he dyed the slides so he could look at them under a microscope. So because, again, they were coming from germ theory and thought bacteria were causing these diseases, right? Because that was the belief at the time, it was thought, great, bacteria cause tuberculosis. So how do we kill bacteria? Well, Koch found out if you dye a slide with blue colorants, bacteria dies. How do you kill TB? You dye them with colorants. So let's make people eat paintballs to kill the bacteria. They didn't know these bacteria were there trying to help you, and the inflammation was all the collection of bacteria exploding in the area that needed to be healed. See? So it's not evil people. It's letting blood with leeches. This is a Dark Ages This is a Dark Ages belief because they don't understand biochemistry.
Yeah.
And now they understand it, but they won't tell us because they're making $3 trillion selling you Tamiflu, aspirin. That when you have a fever, you're trying to expunge toxins from your body. The dumbest thing you could do is to take aspirin to stop your body from fevering out those toxins. Those Indians had sweat lodges for a reason. The people in Finland and northern Sweden sit in a sauna for a reason. It's to get toxins out. They're not. If they didn't want to get the toxins out, they'd go sit in a snowdrift, not the sauna. Right? Why the fuck you got a sauna in Finland? Right? Go sit in a snowdrift because the snowdrift doesn't get rid of toxins. The sauna does. That's why Finnish and northern Swedish people built saunas and sweat lodges. Because sitting in a snowdrift doesn't remove toxins.
Yeah, so true. And I think this also shows, Steve, I mean, you talked about Trivium before and how it's so hard to make people understand these problems when they have false knowledge, because I mean we all know that bacteria cause disease.
They don't, though. They don't.
No. But
we think we know.
We think we know. Yeah, everyone thinks we know bacteria cause disease, and then if you start talking about this and antibiotics, and because I mean you can show in a double-blind randomized study that people with a sore throat who receives antibiotics, they don't have a sore throat. But people who don't receive antibiotics, they still have a sore throat. But as you're saying, it's a cleaning process. And
why is the throat sore?
Yeah, why is the throat sore? So
right? Because you're healing. And I said this on the last thing I did. Joe Rogan was just in the news with ivermectin, right? This is the big news. So here's the problem, and I don't have a problem with Joe Rogan. He's a fucking great MMA announcer. He's a bad comedian, but he's got a cool podcast. It's Oprah for Guys. I love Joe Rogan, right? So here's the problem. Joe Rogan never claimed he's a doctor. He doesn't claim he has medical knowledge. Joe Rogan thought he had COVID because he took a bullshit test that can't detect COVID. He was feeling bad. He had the flu and the fever and sweats because he was toxic, and his body in flu season was expunging toxins. So you get sweats, shakes, and chills to squeeze the toxins out of your muscles into your bloodstream. Then you have to sweat them out, run them out of your boogers with your runny nose, cough them out, puke them out, shit them out. Now, that's painful. Healing is painful. A sore throat hurts. We all know that. The reason it hurts is because you've got trillions of bacteria eating toxins in your throat, and it causes inflammation. When something's eating shit alive inside you, you get inflamed. Have a dog chew on your elbow for an hour and see if your elbow's not huge. It will be fucking huge. Now, Joe Rogan, because he doesn't know any better, he thinks that the pain is disease. He doesn't know he's healing, right? John, you know this, right? So what does Joe Rogan do? He hears that taking ivermectin stops the pain and takes away the symptoms. And it does. Just like no one can deny, when you have a headache, if I punch you in the head and give you a concussion and you take a headache, you don't feel a headache anymore, right? It didn't stop the bruise of your brain that causing the headache, or if you're dehydrated or stressed, or there's many reasons you could have a headache. No one can deny that taking 2 aspirins won't stop you feeling pain from dehydration, stress, or being punched in the head with a bruised brain. No one can deny that. No one can deny that taking ivermectin stops your boogers from sweating out, and your sweat and your poo and your diarrhea and the coughing. But the reason ivermectin does that, and I use this as a metaphor, if you need to take a shit because you have a bunch of poisons in your colon and you start taking a shit but it hurts because you're taking a big hurting shit, like, oh, the last thing you would do is squeeze your butt and stop taking that shit halfway through, right? Even though it hurts. We've all had a dump like that. We're like, oh my God, you wouldn't stop taking a shit and hold it in for 5 weeks or a year. You wouldn't do that. No rational person would do that. Well, your body is pooing out toxins. It's the same thing. So Joe Rogan's body's taking a shit because he's toxic, because he smokes weed, drinks, whatever, he eats tons of meat, whatever he's doing. Now, he takes ivermectin, and ivermectin is an acute toxin. It's a very deadly toxin. It's so acute that you can only have 2 micrograms. That's why it's a horse dewormer. You don't have a liver the size of a horse. Now, the body says, oh, my God, this dickhead is taking